This is Kathy Chase. As I talked about dictators and how they think they can cook me because I stepped on a piece of glass and they put RFID in my foot, as in socks or sockets. They're absolutely crazy. No, you cannot. Famous dictators. You have Joseph Stalin. These people are so sideways. And Adolf Hitler. Well, as people know, on radio towers and on power buttons, you have red lights and some blink. Some are blinking red lights, some are not. They're just red. Record is a red light. Play is, sometimes on equipment there's red lights. Fast forward, rewind, and so forth. Stop is on controllers when they're red. As I mentioned, Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler. There are probably a great list of dictators in which, like Karl Marx, Shannon Bartusek, her maiden name Hubert. She married a man named Mark Bartusek, and his mother's name is Rose Bartusek. As I talked about the whole cult thing with Rosemary's Baby, them trying to kill me and my baby, and they've chipped my other kids too, and they've got Amber totally brainwashed and all against her mom, influencing her and bribing Sean. They get her involved with sex with people that are over age, and some I believe are rock stars here in Lincoln, Nebraska. They're trying to sell out her mother to her because she's at a vulnerable age where, being in is cool, and she don't quite understand that her mother, back in the 8th grade, her mom ran off to Des Moines, Iowa to try to protect her because the same darn people were trying to kill her with the Amber 311 song back in the 8th grade. And it's really sad when I have gone to extreme lengths to protect my children, and it's so frustrating for me as a mother, and that, it's frustrating, it's saddening that people would just gang up on me suddenly and just, as if my life wasn't destroyed enough by, the hands of other people. They wanted to take advantage of it, and they had everything to begin with, and they were just so greedy. What I don't understand, as I talked about, well, why didn't the presidents help me out and then make up something later instead of letting people hurt me with slanderous things and so forth? And then, they could have made something up later, or they could have helped me out and faked my death or something. These people they're just so obsessed with having me dead because, Kim, it's so romantic. Look at the stuff they abuse me with. They abuse me with the Constitution. They abuse me with military protocols and, funeral protocols and all kinds of military protocols they abuse me with. And it's just so incredibly sick. What I don't understand is, I was so nice to these people. I was always apprehensive of the Lassens. I bought them gifts. I bought them even after I got kicked offline and knew that they were a part of it. I still went and took their baby a present and dropped it off at their door and left it for them. I bought her flowers, and I bought I ordered Tim a cookie from the cookie company. I did nice things for these people. I bought Shannon gifts when she was in the hospital, when she had her pneumonia with her baby. I knew Shannon since the 8th grade. And what I don't understand is these people just they have so many connections that the presidents hold so much favoritism for them. Where is their guilt, and why is it that instead of making things worse and worse and worse and worse, like they have, everything's declined to entrap me in like a narrowing pattern to make things worse and worse and worse in my life. But what I don't understand is, there was no prevention taken. People never said anything to me over the years, people proclaim to be my friends, and then evidently, you evidently you can use friendships and marriages to premeditate murder and hide behind things the government don't want to talk about in order to conduct that. If they had any integrity whatsoever, even after all the things people know what they've done, you would think that they would look for a way to help me. Whether, they could say I'm dead. They could help me and then say I'm dead and go on with their lives. But they're so self-centered. I guess the only thing I can think of is that they're so self-centered since they hurt me in my life so bad. All these people from high school, they're so self-centered that they just are just obsessed with murder, when there was obvious ways to prevent all of this. They had many years, and then even between things, they haven't gotten a conscience. And I guess because they're running back and forth to all their connections and throwing their money around, which is technically blood money, in my pain, and the pain of my children, the things I've had to go through, and the things I've watched my children go through, these people are just cruel. And Christmas I have to deal with more stuff, They're just horrible people. I don't know where they think they have the rights to put things in my body and then claim they own me for those things. You can't do that. Do you know how horrible that is? To victimize and re-victimize and then re-victimize and then re-victimize. These people have no consciences. And if they were put in a situation where they were left out to think about the things that they've done, where people shunned them and segregated them like they've done to me, how long would they last, knowing the things that they've done? They see people keep them busy. They go back and forth with their social groups. And I don't know how this is even socially acceptable. These people posed as my friends. I was with Rob for 20 years. It's not my fault. When these women take this out on me, Shannon and Kim, they take this out on me that Rob chose me to begin with. And that is not my problem. Had I known all this, I would have never been with him to begin with. And you're picking on the wrong person. I keep thinking of Amy Fisher and Joey Buttafuoco, Only this is somewhat about 1 billion times worse because it never ends, The nightmare never ends. It just keeps going and going and going, And this is so un-American. And my biggest dream is just to get me and my kids out alive, Just to live a normal life, because people stole my life, and they don't care, They stole my life. They're trying to steal my identity. They have no consciences. How could you have no conscience? about exactly, the Chase family. Rob was with me for 20 years. Oh, he's 39 years old now. He won't need you anymore. He's already chipped up the kids and got them ready for the black market, just like what happened to me. Because it's obvious. I mean, they say this wall thing in Wall Street and Wall-E, the movie, or whatever. And then the tax cuts. They use this tax cuts thing. Oh, I've made people so much money. You know what they're talking about? They're talking about entertainment industry tax revenue the government's obtained from profits that people have written about me, and they're talking about products developed because of my life, or indirect monies, and some direct, about my life, and the amount of monies are astronomical, and the least they could do is just freaking give me my life back, because they stole it. They stole my life, and they have no remorse over stealing someone's life. And then they had no remorse about doing what they've done to my children. No, they have none. No remorse. They don't care. They just look for more ways to hurt. They look for more ways to hurt me and my children, and I don't understand. How could you be so cold and so compassionless to come upon someone's life suddenly and make all kinds of inconsistent claims about them when they knew the fact of the matter and the cause and all that, just to stir up problems, creating more problems in my life, because nobody wanted to take responsibility, nobody wanted to be rational, and they stole my life. And I don't know why they can't get that through their heads. They've stolen my life. They think they can own my thoughts and feelings, but they can't. That was taken from me. That's private. That's a violation. That's something that's left me vulnerable for years, but you can't re-violate me and penalize me because I was a victim to begin with thoughts and feelings that were never yours to begin with. And they can't even be thankful for all the money he's generated through the bad things that have happened to me, but they gotta go around and go on and do it to my kids. Where do these people stop? Why can't they just say, okay, it would let them feel like they got a victory if they could pretend I'm dead, and they could say I'm dead and fake my death, or they can make up something to help me and then make up something later, whatever would satisfy them and their egos. But really, to be this vicious, to pretend you're somebody's friend and somebody's lover for 20 years, I met Rob in April of 1990, and it's just appalling and just sick, that people are just disposable to him in his life because I stepped on a piece of glass and got chipped. So they want to label me with all this other crap, the RFID site, the I isn't capitalized, and I is the only letter in the alphabet. That there's A and I are words with single letter words that stand alone. I is the only one that should be capitalized by what most composition teachers would say. And eyes and my eyes and RFID is, mostly yellow in color, and they have octagon 8-sided It's an 8-sided shape and a lot of RFID connections. And the whole thing with abusing me with MASH 4077, you know, mashed potatoes and dictators and Corporal Klinger. Okay, they get the Klinger thing, aluminum foil and Reynolds wrap. Well, you know, online it says, well, aluminum foil won't block RFID. Well, that's a given. But I'm wondering if I was to put on one of those Knights suits or whatever, you know, where it's all covered in metal, like a metal shield, whatever you call them. I don't know, I can't remember what they're called, but you know what I'm talking about. Like the Southeast Knights, they have the thick metal, you know, just back in the days when, you know, you had knights and swordsmen and you know, back in the days where, you know, like Robin Hood type stuff, you know, or you know, just weird stuff. But I'm kind of wondering if that would block the RFID. I have no idea, because those things are pretty thick. Anyways, no, I just don't understand why all of a sudden people attacked me, and just because they're guilty, they didn't want to ever stop to look at their consciences and say, well, that's not fair, that's not right, you know, she was a victim to begin with, and we went and took advantage of it because of greed. You know, some of it might have been that they didn't want me to know rock stars or whatever, or some of it might have been that, you know, they didn't want me to, they wanted me to be gone and be with my husband alone and that sort of thing. But you know, there's been so many ways to problem solve, and by, you know, presidents ignoring me and going back and forth between the social dramas of Kim and Shannon and Randy, or you know, and Rob, you know, going between those, and Nick Hexum and whoever else, and they could have stopped somewhere along the way and, you know, been logical, because I had said, like, what, 6 months ago that I was willing to sign papers, you know, as far as the liabilities go. But they've, you know, they keep trying to prove themselves guilty of just wanting to commit murder to someone who didn't even know what hit them, you know? It's like, you can't do that. You can't just walk up to someone and say, well, this happened to you, and we want to kill you now because, you know, we just wanted to leave you vulnerable all those years, and you know, we thought we could own your thoughts and your feelings and who you were because of what happened to you, and you know, people don't have to have integrity to your life, and they don't have to have respect for your life because you were victimized. And just, you know, them repeating that with my kids is just, you know, insane. I wish people would get a conscience. I really do. I really wish they would. Because I love my kids and I want to raise them. And I want to raise them right. I want to give them a stable life. And I want to get them. I preferably would love to get my kids out of here, you know, because there's too much dysfunction here, obviously. People taking advantage of other people and problems, and this Pitt's process of dysfunction, which they just keep rumoring and spreading money and hatred with the goal to commit murder. And I don't see how that's American or Christian or something you do to somebody that just, you know, it's not their fault to begin with. Why don't you get it through your head and get out of denial? Get out of denial and realize that this is my privacy, and this is something you're in denial about, and that my life was stolen from me. Why can't you get out of denial? Why can't you have compassion for a person who just wants to live her life? My life was quiet. He could have gotten a quiet divorce. That's not my fault they wanted to do this. There was no reason for them to provoke problems because, government agencies had never contacted me and so forth. I could have moved on with Rob even with having this stuff in my body and still, lived a pretty normal life without even knowing. But they got greedy. They just keep getting greedy and greedier and greedier and greedier and greedier when they had everything. They had access to money and rock stars and living life, traveling, which I've never done, and done all kinds of things in their lives, and they just can never get enough. They just had too much of the gimmies, and as to why you can't get these people to gather a conscience and to know that, we stole her life. People stole her life. How would you feel if you were in this situation? Would you want this in your body to the fact that you would be cast out in an outcast situation where people, all they did was provoke you, abuse you for things in which you were victimized with to begin with? No, I don't think so. And I don't know. I don't know what's wrong with these people. I really don't. I can't figure it out. I can't figure out how or when, people's consciences are going to roll around and say, this is logically what happened, and for people to get out of denial and stop blaming me for what they did wrong. This is Kathy Chase. I don't know what to do.